Oh, you're here. Good. I was hoping for company. You see, I've got stories, dark ones, chilling ones, the kind that keep you up at night. Mythical creatures, curses, horrors you can't escape. Shall we begin? Don't worry, I won't bite. Much.
My grandma used to work as a servant in a wealthy household in her village when she was young. The family was surnamed Zhang and lived in a traditional courtyard house with 3 generations under one roof. The eldest in the family was the grandfather, an old man in his 60s who was still in good health and full of energy. He was in charge of all household affairs. His son, Ken, was a good-for-nothing. Ever since he was young, he had been gambling, drinking, and lazing around. He only got married and had children in his 30s, but even after turning 40, he hadn't changed. He still spent most of his time gambling in town, and his family had long given up on him. The incident happened when Ken was 40. My grandma was only 15 at the time, working from dawn till dusk. That night, Ken had gone gambling in town again. As usual, he lost everything, down to his last penny. Without money for a ride home, he had no choice but to walk back along the dark countryside road. The village road at night was pitch black and eerily silent. Only the rustling of leaves in the wind and the occasional croaking of frogs in the fields could be heard. Frustrated and cursing under his breath, Ken trudged forward when suddenly, he froze. Up ahead, at the village entrance, something was hanging from the old locust tree. The locust tree had stood at the village entrance for over a century. It had thick roots, an enormous trunk, and dense branches. The elders in the village always said the tree was strange, and people usually avoided going near it. But tonight, under the moonlight, a woman's head emerged from the tree trunk. She had long jet-black hair, an eerily pale complexion, and delicate, almost painted-looking features. Her wide-open eyes stared at Ken, motionless, as if she had been waiting for him. A chill ran down Ken's spine, but his feet felt glued to the ground. Who are you?" he stammered. The woman didn't answer. She only blinked slowly. Taking a deep breath, Ken forced himself to step closer. He tried to convince himself it was just someone playing a prank, or maybe a woman who had somehow gotten stuck inside the tree. But as he drew nearer, she didn't struggle. Instead, she smiled. It was a soft, gentle smile, yet utterly unnerving. Ken's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He wanted to run, but at the same time, he found the woman impossibly beautiful. Under the moonlight, her skin looked as smooth as porcelain, her eyes captivating and seductive. Before he realized what he was doing, he reached out and touched her face. Warm. To his shock, the woman tilted her head slightly as if welcoming his touch. Ken's mind went blank. His throat was dry, his pulse racing. He hesitated for only a moment before leaning in and kissing her cheek. The moment his lips touched her skin, her smile deepened. Then, in a soft, almost pleading voice, she whispered 2 words. "Take me." Her voice dripped with an eerie sweetness, like a lover's whisper in the dead of night. Ken's thoughts blurred, a dark compulsion creeping in. He had to pull her free. He grabbed her shoulders and yanked with all his strength. But to his horror, her body was completely embedded in the tree. Only her head and part of her neck protruded. Frowning, Ken yanked harder. Suddenly, crack, then crack. The woman's head lurched forward. Inch by inch, her neck slithered free, but the rest of her never emerged. A terrifying realization crept into Ken's mind. Just as he was about to let go, the woman's eyes snapped wide open. Her mouth stretched grotesquely, gaping as wide as a wash basin, revealing rows of jagged black teeth. "Take me!" Her voice screeched, sharp and shrill, like nails on glass. Ken sobered up instantly. Terror surged through him. He let go of her and bolted. Ken sprinted as if his life depended on it, losing a shoe along the way. By the time he stumbled into the courtyard of his house, he was deathly pale, his lips trembling. My grandma, who had just gotten up to use the toilet, stepped out and saw Ken, disheveled, wild-eyed, and gasping for breath. "Ken, what happened?" Ken grabbed her arm, his voice stuttering. The locust tree. There's a woman in the tree. She came out." "What?" My grandma was dumbfounded. At that moment, the light inside flickered on. The old grandfather, awakened by the commotion, stepped out, pulling on his robe. When he heard Ken's words, his face turned deathly serious. "Tell me, you didn't touch her?" The old man's voice was ice cold, his eyes sharp as knives. Ken looked away, his silence answering the question. The grandfather's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and spat. "You're doomed. You've been married." My grandma shuddered. "Married? What do you mean?" The grandfather's voice was grim. "That locust tree is haunted. Something lives inside it. Anyone who touches her, she'll cling to them forever. Ken kissed her tonight. That means he's taken a ghost bride." The oil lamp in my grandma's hand slipped and shattered on the ground. Even after all these years, she said she could still remember how cold the night air felt then. Ken's legs gave out. He almost collapsed to the ground. Early the next morning, the grandfather gathered the village elders. They set up an altar at the locust tree, burning incense and praying all day. That night, they brought in a Taoist priest to perform a ritual. The ceremony lasted well into the night. A few days later, a group of young men, emboldened by curiosity, took axes and chopped open the locust tree. Inside the hollow trunk, they found a dried-up female corpse. Her face was identical to the woman Ken had seen. Even in death, her lips curved in a strange, knowing smile. From that night on, Ken was never seen in the village again. Every year on the Qingming festival, the old grandfather would burn paper offerings at the village entrance, whispering under his breath, "Forgive me, forgive me." Eventually, the locust tree was completely removed. But even now, some villagers say that on quiet nights, if you stand near the village entrance, you can still hear a woman's soft, ghostly laughter floating on the wind.